want to talk to you today about a substance that has divided communities, sparked massive debates over academic freedom and free trade, and seen a bootleg trade that's seen people sent to prison and law enforcers kept busy over decades worldwide. And I am talking, of course, about, well, what else could I be talking about? Margarine. Yes, margarine. I was reading about margarine for a piece I was writing for the Post and Echo, where I work about the Stork margarine plant in Bromborough. And it turns out this boring gold stuff is actually one of the most controversial foodstuffs in history. Forget GM food. This is where it's at. Now, it was invented by this guy, Hippolyte Mege Mouries, after Napoleon III in France asked for a cheap foodstuff to be created. It's named after the Greek word for pearls, by the way, as in pearls of fat. It went into production fairly quickly. That's the Stork margarine plant in Bromborough in the 50s. But very quickly it became very controversial because dairy producers realised it would stop the sale of butter. And dairy producers are, oddly enough, very, very, very militant. Now in Britain, actually things were quite straightforward, as you can see from that quote there. In Britain, margarine became accepted very quickly. As an aside, the definitive book on margarine was published by Liverpool University Press in 1969, which is where a lot of this information comes from. But elsewhere, things were very strange indeed. Take New Zealand as an example. In New Zealand, margarine was quite simply banned until 1974, that's it. Lovely blog online from an 80-something blogger talking about how he got a Qantas pilot to deliver some bootleg margarine to his house, and he got besieged by neighbours desperately wanting margarine. And in Denmark, there's a dispute between the government and Parliament in the late 19th century that came known as the Butter War, and Parliament even got dissolved over it. And eventually Denmark did pass a Margarine Act in 1888. And this legislation did actually specify the 14 shades of yellow in which margarine could be made. The problem is, the colour of margarine changes depending on the temperature and the sunlight, among other things. So this caused all kinds of problems. But the most interesting battles of all were actually fought in North America, in the US and Canada. Because in the early days, unscrupulous margarine vendors did sell all kinds of dodgy stuff and labelled it as butter. So there was a problem. And this gave the dairy industry the ammunition it needed to start pushing for legislation, which indeed it did. And they also started a propaganda campaign. My favourite quote is this one from Governor Lucius Hubbard of Minnesota. It will be admitted that the ingenuity of depraved human genius has culminated in the production of oleomargarine and its kindred abominations. So this went national, and in 1886 the Federal Oleomargarine Act was imposed. It imposed a tax on margarine and a licence on all margarine producers. And the Supreme Court eventually upheld that states couldn't ban white margarine, but they could ban coloured margarine. And this is where things get weird again. By 1902, 32 states had banned the sale of coloured margarine. And some states, including New Jersey, said margarine had to be dyed pink. Others wanted margarine dyed red. Others wanted it dyed black. It's wanted to make it as unappealing as possible. Did law enforcers take this seriously? Yes, they did. That's Charles Will there. In 1915, he was sent to the Federal Penitentiary at Leavenworth, Kansas, for violating the Oleomargarine Act. And then there was Joseph Worth as well. Him and his brother Tony both found themselves there in 1911, convicted of illegal oleomargarine commerce. Guilty face? Not guilty face? Who knows? But change was quite slow coming, and we had the Iowa margarine incident. It was at Iowa State University during the Second World War. It produced a paper suggesting that if they made margarine production sale easier, it would actually help the US war effort because it would save resources and everything else. But the Iowa dairy industry objected. The university withdrew the paper, and ultimately the head of the economics department of the university resigned in protest. So yeah, Wisconsin was the last holdout. Wisconsin actually banned margarine until 1967. Shops over the border in Illinois and Iowa used to have great big signs advertising margarine across the border to encourage people across. That guy there is writing saying that he wants margarine to stay illegal so he can keep selling it and making money off it. Canada, even weirder again. It was illegal completely until 1948. Why? Because Newfoundland margarine was legal. They used to make it, import it into Canada illegally. When it became part of Canada in 1948, they had to make margarine legal in Canada. That's the British North America Act there. It's very legalese, but it proves my point. Quebec, as so often in Canada, did it completely differently. Margarine was banned completely until 1961. In 1987, they said margarine had to be white. They insisted on that again. And even as late as 2005, there was a raid of 4 Walmart stores in Quebec City where they seized, this quote from the Montreal Gazette, 72 plastic tubs of yellow margarine with an estimated street value of $179.28. The law was only changed in 2008, and the debate is still going on because just in March the Supreme Court of Quebec ruled that Unilever couldn't say margarine had a buttery taste, and it fined it a massive $500. So if you think margarine's boring, think again. you.